It's nice to be here, just men. That there's some little subtle feeling, and it's subtle, but where we can relax a little bit, and the ego relaxes a little bit, where we don't feel that we have to worry about what does this person think about me, what does that person think about me. And when we can, in that spirit of relaxation of the ego, come together for God, it's very enjoyable. It's very nice. So, this evening, I'm going to talk for a little while about this book, Sadhu Beware, and I'll just go over the first chapter of it, and I'll be doing this week after week, and we'll be posting it up on our website, and so I urge everyone, week after week, to read each chapter, either before or after this, but to tune in to Swamiji, because it's an important thing that he's talking about in this book. And so, the introduction to this first chapter talks about what is Ananda Sangha, and that Ananda Sangha is designed as a place for people to come who want God realization, as a place where people want to renounce the world already. And then within Ananda Sangha, we have another class, or you could say of people, brahmacharis and the Naya Swamis, who even further are really trying to put on a different set of clothes and trying to outwardly say, I am outwardly giving up everything. I completely give my life to God. And so this line of what is a renunciate within Ananda can become quite blurry, of who is giving their life to God, and are you a renunciate, are you an Ananda, and so I want to talk this evening very clearly about this, because this is what this first chapter is about. And if that line becomes too blurry, those who really are trying to give everything for God have the danger of slipping and falling back into the very life that they're trying to get rid of. And so we have to spell out these differences quite clearly. And that will go on over the series of these talks of what these differences are, but we'll talk a little bit about it this evening. And so when a new person comes to Ananda and sees people wearing different sets of clothes, that we have the brahmacharis and the brahmacharinis wearing yellow, and these are people that have said that they do not want to get married. And I hope that this is something also that we can clarify within this order, that there are people who are taking a one-year vow, and there's people that are taking a lifelong vow, and it would be nice if we could have some way of outwardly identifying those that have really said that I'm taking this vow for the rest of my life, and I'm confident that I don't want to get married. And then we have the Naya Swamis, who are wearing blue, who may have been a brahmachari or brahmacharini for a long time, and then decide that they're going to wear blue and that it's full renunciation. And the ideal of that really is that we renounce the ego, and that we are quite confident at that point when we take that Naya Swami vow. However, in Ananda Sangha, we see people that are married as well, wearing blue, and I think for the average newcomer who comes, that can be a little bit confusing, because isn't renunciation about renouncing sex, about renouncing attachment to the opposite sex? And so Swami makes quite clear in this first chapter that the only valid definition of renunciation is renunciation of the ego. And we have to deeply take that into our heart and soul, because there are plenty of people in this world that are jivan muktas, that are God realized, and yet are married. Paramahansa Yoganandaji's closest disciples, many of them were married. And take Sister Gyanamata, for example, that she was married, she had a child, and she did not come to the ashram until her husband passed away, and then she came. However, she achieved the highest realization that is possible, that she became a siddha in this lifetime, not even merely just a jivan mukta. And so this brings us back to, we have to understand that real renunciation means renouncing the ego. Yet at the same time, if we just say, well, then everybody can be a renunciate, and it doesn't matter, then that line becomes very blurry. And we have to, if we're very serious about renouncing our ego, we have to take up certain habits, take up certain understandings, and actually protect ourselves. That you see that the brahmacharis that live in this community, on this land, that we have our own space that we can come to and retreat from even the worldliness that we find within this community. And I'm not blaming the community. This is also a very important part of ego and this whole thing that Ananda Sangha is trying to put together. It's very easy for someone who's wearing yellow or blue to think, oh, well, I'm the real renunciate. And let's say someone wearing yellow, and those people that are married, that, they're second class on the spiritual path, that I really have it together. And that thought right there is ego, and the exact thing that we're trying to overcome. And so those that are married and are seeking God, and those that decide to be single and seeking God, that there must be a respect for one another and a respect for each person's different path. You could say that ego divides, it separates and says, he's over there and I'm over here. And then ego goes on further to saying, he's bad because he does this, and I'm so good because I do that. You could imagine the ego saying, oh, look, there's my friend, and he chose to drink water, but I chose to drink juice. Look how much smarter I am because I choose to drink juice. And the ego will just run with this type of thing and think, why, gosh, I'm so smart. I should be president of this country. And why don't they make me president of the world? And if you can watch the ego, and this is why we meditate, to learn to become aware of our thoughts, to watch them, you realize these thoughts are ridiculous. And I don't want to be president of a country or president of the world. That all I want to do is love God. And we realize that the ego is constantly dividing and saying that, oh, I'm up above this guy or I'm below this guy. And what we're trying to do is completely renounce the ego and renounce all the attachments to this outer world, that the ego seeks to draw us outside of ourselves and say, oh, this thing will make me happy, that thing will make me happy. But those things outside of ourselves will never make us happy. That the only happiness we can ever find is within ourselves. That I had an interesting thing happen to me. I was teaching a class in Bangalore, and I gave the students a homework assignment. I said, when you go home for dinner this evening, if something is served that you might like, I don't know, paneer, as you're eating that paneer, pay attention. And you'll notice, if you deeply pay attention on the inside, that it's your reaction on the inside that makes you say, oh, the paneer is so good. And if someone serves you something you don't like, there's a gourd here in India called Karela, bitter gourd. And let's say you might not like, oh, the bitter gourd. But it's not that gourd at all. It's your reaction to it. It says, And there's constantly within our own selves our likes and dislikes making us think that this world is good or bad, but actually it's just neutral. And we want to learn to renounce that. Another way of looking at that same principle is, if you take a little child to the zoo, that he will see all the animals and he's so happy, and now take me to this one, and can we eat the popcorn and this and that? And perhaps you run around with that child, but by the end of the day, you say, oh, let's go see the crocodile. And child says, I just want to go home. I don't want to see the crocodile. Is it that the crocodile lost its appeal? That the zoo now is less appealing? No. It's that the child has lost his energy to be able to appreciate these outward stimuli. And this brings us back to becoming a brahmachari, that really what we're trying to do is withdraw our energy and not let our energy just go out and go into these five senses. There's a very important principle that Paramahansa Yoganandaji gave us, and it is that the more that we indulge in these senses, it will create moods for us. And then we have these moods and we think, well, I'm having a bad day. Of course I deserve to be able to eat some ice cream and watch more TV. And we indulge in the senses, and then those senses give us more moods. And then we have more moods, and this infinite cycle goes on. But if we can learn to arrest, if a child's on a swing like this, there's certain movements you can do to stop the forward motion and the backward motion. So if we can stop going for it out in the five senses, believing that this is going to make us happy, you could say plug the holes in the pail of our inner peace. And then the two things, if we can, I lost my train of thought with the pail of milk there, but I completely lost it. Where were we? Oh yeah, thank you, and the moods. Right, so we're trying to not go for the five senses, and we're trying to control our moods. So if we have a mood, we want to say this mood is on the inside, and then learn to control our emotions on the inside and lift our energy up inwardly and take control of that mood from the inside rather than trying to fix it on the outside, which never works. So let's get back to this again, really clearly defining these two energies within Ananda Sangha. One that would be someone perhaps who is married, although they could even be single, but they don't want to take a brahmachari vow, but they know that they've come to Ananda to find God. And then someone else who very seriously says, I'm willing to put on the clothes. I'm willing to say outwardly to this world, this is what I'm doing with my life. And the person that has that courage to put on the clothes, to outwardly say this is what I'm doing with my life, there's a power that comes with that. But at the same time, it's not for everyone. And each person has to be honest with where they are. That Master said that if someone takes up this vow and breaks it, that all of the forces will be upon him. And I've seen many people almost take up the vow for the wrong reason, thinking that, oh, outwardly then everybody will think that, I'm so good for a little bit of, I don't know, almost it's indulging the ego in a different type of way. Or I've seen people pick this thing up thinking, well, as soon as I just, outwardly affirm it really strong, then it's just going to be okay, and I'll really be able to make headway in this way. And it doesn't work. That someone has to really know that they're ready on the inside to take this. But once they do, then people that have taken up this vow need to protect themselves. And we'll go into it more deeply. I don't want to talk too long this evening into this book, but spiritually protecting oneself is really an art. And it's something that you learn as you go, and you learn about your own energy on the inside, and you learn about something called magnetism that we teach in the classes. And it's a way that we can grow spiritually very quickly. But at the end of the day, every human being is going to have to learn these lessons about energy, have to learn these lessons about magnetism, have to learn the lesson really of who we are. That we are all one, that we are on the inside, that there's a God within us, and that's who we truly are. And each one of us has to come back to this truth in our own way. And it's really, to me, the beautiful thing. And it's the beautiful thing about Ananda Sangha, that it allows each person to come to this truth in their own way. And so I think it's very important that we all work together, and that we support each person in the manner that they're going for God realization, and that we also support, but then also give people space to do it in their way, and let people's understanding develop in his or her own way. We really can't teach people anything. We think that we can. Oh, I learned this great truth. But really what we're doing is awakening that knowledge that is inherent, latent, already within each person. And we're helping them to understand, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because ultimately we already know everything. We already are everything. But that we've enmeshed ourselves in this delusion, and we're just trying to get ourselves out. And we will get ourselves out. It takes willpower and it takes love. And you have to balance those two. That if you have too much willpower, and that can easily happen in the case of becoming a brahmachari, that just this willpower can develop, but you can even see it in the physical body, that people that have a lot of willpower, they'll be like this, but they're not balanced, and they're just going through life just trying to push everything from here, and it will fall over and it will collapse. And people that have a lot of love, their energy might be here, but that also too can collapse. It can lead us outwardly too much, and each soul really has to learn to balance those forces. And as you learn to balance those forces, they become much greater. That your will becomes very strong and very big, and you have to be very careful with it so that you don't hurt people or try to push them around too much. And as that grows, then your love grows very big. And as that love grows very big, you get to feel that you are within every soul. I'm going to say two more things and wrap up. The first here is that Swamiji would talk about that this desire has been implanted in human beings for having sex, and it's just one of the desires that each one of us has to overcome. But he said infinitely more enjoyable is the pleasure of touching all of the creation from the inside out. Can you imagine that? Touching every atom or every soul. You can break up creation however you want and try to put boundaries around it, but ultimately it's center everywhere, circumference nowhere, touching all of creation simultaneously from the inside out. That's when the heart will really feel at peace and really feel what it truly is, which is perfect love for all of creation. And then the other thing is I'd like on each one of these different talks just to give a little tip for those who are watching, the brahmacharis, and once a week I'll try to give a tip. And so this one's a little silly, but sometimes it's nice just to have fun. And early on when I was a brahmachari, I would, perhaps a young, beautiful woman would come into the room or something. And I call this the hairy old man technique. And as soon as, this beautiful woman just comes into the room, I would mentally think, not that long ago, perhaps, 30 years ago, this is a soul. I mean, that was a hairy old man that soul act was. And now I see that as a beautiful woman, but it's not. And if you use that train of thought, and first of all, the heart will, from attraction to repulsion, and you realize, well, that's not what we're trying to achieve at all, to have the heart flip up and down like that we're trying to achieve a real knowledge of what is, and that we don't want the heart flipping up and down like that we want the heart just perfectly calm and perfectly still. And then you start to realize that all of these bodies that we're wearing, it's just a suit, it's just a disguise, it's not who we truly are. That who we truly are is the soul, and that every human being is a soul. And yes, it's right to love all souls, but you can't love the physical outer package of the body, that you have to love the soul. And when it's truly one soul loving another soul on the highest level, that again is another way of realizing that we're all just one, that the soul itself is in everything, that there is no separation between this soul and that soul, that on that level we're all one. So anyway, just a silly little technique, but it's been a great joy, and I look forward to next week. Thank you all for coming.